when GPT-4o came, it was marketed as like, okay, it can count the number of R's in the word strawberries. So I feel like our kids should be able to eat real strawberries instead of just counting the number of R's in the strawberries using AI.
83% of all coral reefs on the planet have experienced bleaching events. Go scuba diving and snorkeling now.
Yeah.
Scott Bryson, who is the founder at Orbital Farm and is turning the data center heat waste into enough tomatoes that can feed 7.5 million Canadians.
I would love AGI to solve climate change. Will it? No, I don't think so. I don't want my kids living in a world where the whole coastline is gone because of sea level rise.
Nathaniel Burola, who is the founder of the AI and Environment Resource Hub and has curated over 500 AI and environment resources.
AI applications for climate action are ready for real world implementation today versus just being theoretical.
The thing that scares me the most is the
Agrivoltaics, where we're now putting solar panels and being able to provide additional levels of protection from
this AI race that we're currently in the middle of is largely driven by business interests.
the climate models 14 days out with significant accuracy in weather forecasting. If we can develop systems that can start to do this on 60, 90-day time cycles from a food production standpoint, this will be a profound change.
AI is not like a silver bullet for climate change.
Investors that take these opportunities as first mover are going to have the predictable income and capabilities over the next 10, 20 years.
We did a very edutaining space travel, like going back to your experience with NASA and hearing great insights from Nathaniel. So let's pivot our conversation beyond the cost of training and running AI models, environmental costs of training and running AI models. So there's, of course, an increasing focus on using AI for as a climate solution. So based on your 500 plus resources, Nathaniel, which AI applications for climate action show the most promise? And Scott, as someone building actual infrastructure projects and being an architect of sustainability, which of these applications are ready for real world implementation today versus just being theoretical?
Yeah, another loaded question. I mean, I think before diving into like the AI for good applications with like how AI can be used to like, further the fight against like climate change and all that, I think it's also important to acknowledge that AI is not like a silver bullet for climate change. Like that's one thing that like
enabler,
that's like one thing that I personally believe is that like since the technology carries like such a massive environmental impact, like it's great. Don't get me wrong that it's being deployed in so many ways, and I'll get into that as well. But I think also at the same time, on the education front, like I see like one of like two camps basically. It's like the first is like people are just like, what? Like AI has like an environmental impact. What are you talking about? Like, shouldn't we be using AI in like literally everything that we do? And then the other side is that we shouldn't be using like AI sometimes at all with like specific climate solutions, because believe it or not every solution requires AI. Like that's also like another big thing.
Yeah, definitely.
That,
Yeah.
like,
As a product manager, I can definitely
exactly,
vouch
you
for
know?
that statement. Yeah.
I feel like it feeds also into like the entire like venture capital like hype fund, like every, like for example, when there's this common joke in the industry, like from what my machine learning engineer friends tell me, that like when they talk about like AGI and ASI and all this great stuff, it's like it's always 5 years away, but like they do that. Like we're about to come out with AGI, and it's like great, we can raise another like Series A 40 billion round seed fund for like for our startup. But yeah, I just wanted to toss that out there. Like, I mean, I think that quote again comes from Dr. Legioni. Like, she's a great source of like quotes and all that great stuff.
Yeah, definitely.
AI, I think that's from her TED Talk, is like AI is not a silver bullet for climate change, if I'm not like messing that up. Now, on the AI for good applications, oh my goodness, like I can talk for hours about like the way that AI is being rolled out into different areas of climate change. Like, for example, one of the more interesting use cases that I've seen quite recently is in agritech. agritech. So like, for example, agricultural technology, as we know, climate change, like for example, I think it was in either Italy or Greece, like there was like this one startup company that was working with vineyard farmers because like European summers are frankly getting like hotter and hotter all the time. And that's just all across the planet. So farmers
Mm,
are increasingly having to balance, sacrificing like their vineyard yield capacity on a yearly basis because like it's getting too hot to grow stuff and there's also not enough rainfall. So this one startup was working with, and this was a prototype, but they were working with some vineyard farmers or vineyards folks like in the Italy or Greece region where they were implementing, I think it's called water smart drip irrigation systems in order to max the amount of water that they could use to like water their, vineyards quite literally. And then they were using
mm,
drone technology with machine learning on the back end because it's not just about, generative AI. When we talk about AI, it's an all-encompassing field. Gen AI is just like a small piece of that. I thought Gen AI was all of AI before like I started
uh-huh.
learning about
Yeah,
like
definitely. It's just a part.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's an umbrella term. It's like there's deep
Hmm.
learning, there's
Yeah.
neural networks, and it's just fascinating
Hmm.
to learn about it. But they were using drones, for example, to monitor the spreading of a particular pestilence or like parasite that would like completely eat through like their entire vineyards. So it's a combination of like computer vision, drone technology, AI to like
I guess
maximize like
he's
your water
frozen now.
output in your
Wait,
smart drip irrigation
I'll
system.
I'll add a couple
Oh,
things.
great.
Nathaniel,
Oh, I'm back.
we lost you there you're
Yeah.
back.
Can you
Oh,
repeat the
my bad.
last? Yeah.
Yeah, just really quickly before I cut off again, hotel internet.
Mm.
Combination of like drone technology, computer vision, AI to like essentially just like ensure that vineyard growth is optimal in an increasingly
Mm.
harsh environment, just with temperature, lack of rainfall, etc. That has been like one of the more, I would say,
Mm.
interesting use cases that I've seen in like the past couple of months, but there's plenty.
Yeah. Got it. Got it.
I'll continue on that, and I think that's an interesting example, but I think it does a bit of disservice because of the scale. So drip irrigation and efficient
Mm.
water usage is happening at millions of acres in scale of agriculture. We're using precision agriculture systems where we're using drones and satellite overviews to go down each individual field and specifically tracking exactly where that tractor moves and exactly the right fertilizer that's needed on that little small quadrant of that farm. And so you need to apply more nitrogen in this area, more phosphorus in this area. And so the tractor automatically does and deploys fertilizer in that specific way. So we have huge resources that are already being deployed that are leveraging massive amounts of data and resources and remote sensing capabilities. And so these are already well in practice at millions of acre scales globally. Certainly in Canada and the United States are highly developed. The other areas that of these can be catalytic towards that I thought you were going to talk about was something called agrivoltaics, where we're now putting solar panels in and above or between rows in crops and being able to provide additional levels of protection from extreme weather events, extreme rain or hail or washout or temperature, and really retaining more moisture in those soils, reducing the amount of irrigation that needs to happen in these areas. And the part, I'm going to go back to the data center side of things and back to how these get catalyzed. The
Hmm.
part that starts that is the customer that says, we want to buy renewable energy and we'd like to
Mm.
prioritize agrivoltaics. We'd like to prioritize where you're creating benefit. You're not taking farmland out of circulation. You're improving the agriculture productivity of these areas. And sometimes that actually costs more because you literally have to lift the solar panels up in the amount of racking and systems that you need to put in so that, or the type of actuator so that the solar panels go vertical and to allow a tractor to go through. It just costs more money than doing the stuff that's lower and 100% utilizing the space, but spreading them out by 20% so there's enough sunlight that can still go down. But it takes a customer to write a power purchase agreement to say, I want to buy electricity in this form and I'm willing to pay a small premium. It doesn't have to
Yeah.
be a significant amount, but a small premium to pay for that additional cost and get that ecosystem benefits. And this is how these become catalysts for what will need to be gigawatts of power generation. And so
Yeah.
this is why systemic change in how we build and develop the infrastructure is super critical and how that creates those ecosystem benefits. But I want to come back to say answering your question as well and how these larger AI systems can be applied from a climate standpoint. And what I see as a really big catalyst towards this are the climate models in our ability to be able to predict We're now able to go 14 days out with significant accuracy in weather forecasting.
Mm.
This is a huge
Yeah.
difference when you're able to move this out, and as these models get better, as we're able to get and push past this into 30-day, if we could develop systems that could start to do this on 60, 90-day time cycles, I mean, I'm not
Mm.
sure if we're going to be able to get there in a
Mm.
reasonable time frame, but I mean, super
That will be
intelligence,
huge. Yeah.
it will mean you can plan from a food
Mm.
production standpoint
Yeah.
with significant accuracy. This will be a profound change
Mm.
in our ability. So building these models that become hyper accurate in that weather forecasting predictability is critical. The other really big area that is also the risk is from an insurance standpoint. So how we define and create insurance, how we deal with the reality of a sea level rising, of these extreme storm situations, of the damage to infrastructure that is happening, whether that's a wildfire, whether that's a flood, whether that's a hurricane, tornado situation, whether that's hail
Yeah.
or drought. These have major implications, and the reality of where we live and where we've built our infrastructure today are not in the best places to be resilient towards
Yeah.
this. And 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 what we will see over the next decade, 2 decades, 3 decades of time is we'll see areas that become completely uninsurable. And we're seeing this today from certainly from a fire risk standpoint. And what I see the ability for AI really to be utilizing today is really becoming deeply embedded in this area where we can create much more predictability, where we know we need to better manage a forest, where we know we need to better manage the infrastructure and plan and build dikes and build water systems and model that highly accurately. This is really transformative, and we have to continue investing in this resilient side of the reality of our new world. So these are really important areas.
I think like
Yeah.
another like interesting like area that we haven't mentioned besides like insurance, wildfire management, natural event forecasting, all that good stuff is industrial decarbonization. Like there are frankly like a lot of carbon intensive, energy intensive and this also goes back to like kind of geopolitics and like bringing back manufacturing to the United States. And so like this is kind of an example where like we can sync up like geopolitical priorities with like what this current administration wants, but like also using like an AI for good application to also do environmental good as well, despite whatever's happening with like regulations right now at the
Yeah.
federal level. But setting that aside, like for example, one thing that I saw was like the steel and aluminum industries. These industries are very like, or cement even, like, like these are all very carbon intensive, very energy intensive industries. And like what I've been seeing is like, I had a conversation recently with some sort of supply chain logistics scientist. That was the name of like his job title. I was like, that's a really cool job title.
Interesting. Yeah.
Even better than AI for good researcher being a self-stylized one, you know what I mean? But he was pointing out like, hey, this is like he sent me like a report, and then he pointed out like, hey, this is our supply chain. We're using
Hmm.
AI to identify like A, B, and C. These are like the greatest points where we're emitting the most carbon, and we're using AI to find like alternative compounds that are not as like carbon intensive, energy intensive, all that great stuff. So I think like if we can, on the industrial decarbonization side, like steel, aluminum, manufacturing, like finding like it kind of goes back to what Scott was saying earlier with like the insurance industry and like also homeowners at the same time. Like I have family out in California that were impacted by the wildfires, and just like friends that were impacted by the Palisades fire quite recently too. And so like we see like this withdrawal of these insurance companies because like, hey, it's too much cost to insure like a fire policy or whatever. But if we can use AI to somehow balance all this stuff and like better prepare for natural disasters and like kind of correlate that to like building homes and stuff like that, it's kind of all these things kind of interconnect together, which is like I think what we'll start to see more of as we go into the future is this synthesis of like policy, of business, corporate responsibility, home ownership, all these things coming together. So it's very
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, to add to all these great use cases, Scott, you mentioned in your LinkedIn post about coral reefs. You mentioned that there may be only years remaining to experience their biodiversity. And projects like the ocean cleanup and other projects that are ongoing, they are working actively towards cleaning up the ocean so that we can conserve and preserve the biodiversity that we have in our oceans and what other water bodies. So yeah, like there are a plethora of opportunities of AI in climate change, and it can act as an enabler, of course, as Nathaniel mentioned, a dual use technology for sure. So let's wrap this conversation. Like I don't feel like, but we have to, because I have taken almost half an hour extra of both of your time. So as we wrap this conversation, I would like to get your vision for the future. Imagine it's 2035 and we have successfully developed AGI while minimizing its environmental impact. What does that world look like to you, and what's one critical decision that we need to make today as humanity as a whole to ensure AGI development serves both human progress and planetary health?
You know,
Yeah,
I'll
that's good. Oh, go ahead, go ahead.
I
Yeah.
was gonna say I'll start with the coral reefs for a second. So 2035, you better have
Mhm.
been scuba diving and snorkeling between now and then, because regardless of what we do with AGI, regardless of anything else, we
Mhm.
are not going to have the biodiversity in our coral reefs. There's
Mhm.
This is sort of pretty much baked in. There's already
Mhm.
83% of all coral reefs on the planet have experienced bleaching events. This
Mhm.
is getting
Yeah.
dramatic, and we cannot produce enough. So go scuba diving and snorkeling now. Uh,
Yeah.
but more in from an AI standpoint,
Mhm.
in 2035, what has been done, this is going to sound a broken record from this conversation, but you
Mhm.
know, what I believe will happen and what we will have implemented will be ability to be able to advantage data centers that have taken into account how they are dealing where where they're catalyzing being carbon neutral energy resources and heat use, where they become critical infrastructure for the communities, for the cities, and for other critical infrastructure that surround these data centers. These will be integral part of our society, and
Mhm.
as critical as we look at turning on the lights today, this is what our data centers and our infrastructure that power the AI systems and the compute requirements and the storage requirements that will be necessary in that world. And so I think that we need to really deeply focus on this today. And I think that the entities and the owners that have had that foresight of today that are implementing these assets will still have world leading utilized assets in 2035, which is only 10 years away from now. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
it comes pretty fast. So that's sort of
Yeah.
where I see things happening. I think that from a space development standpoint and
Mm.
technology, we will have a significant paradigm shift
Mm.
over the next 10 years of the resource
Yeah.
extraction capabilities in outer space, of the robotic capabilities that will be completely unlocked with this massive growth in AI and our massive growth in robotic systems that will have been developed to be able to produce and utilize those resources. So I think we will see a huge shift and change from a space resource utilization standpoint and from a compute and our power generation standpoint that will be look very dramatically different and be driven by economics from that standpoint. And I think that the investors today that take advantage of what is predictable in over 10-year, 20-year timeframes, it is this critical infrastructure. It is these types
Yeah.
of assets and investment opportunities that become systemically needed, regardless of which platform or AI or AGI system that gets developed.
Mm.
Power is necessary, compute is necessary, facilities that can manage and host that as new chipsets come out, as new technological advances, as quantum becomes an integral part of how these systems operate. Power, building infrastructure, being the catalyst for positive change and being the place that the technologies and the platforms that communities want in your community, these are going to be the winning entities, and the investors that take these opportunities at first mover are going to be the
Mm.
ones that have the predictable income and
Mm.
capabilities over the next 10, 20 years time frame.
Yeah. Yeah.
I feel like
That's a
Scott
powerful
summarized
input.
it better than I ever could, honestly. Like that was such a succinct way of like tying all the various
Yeah.
topics together. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm going to try to give it like a different answer just to kind of contribute like a different narrative
Yeah,
to the
yeah,
conversation. But
yeah.
there was a really cool report that recently came out a couple of months ago. It was called AI in 2027. It was like a collaborative research effort by like I think 100 of like the top AI researchers in the industry. That was like kind of a simulation based on varying parameters of like where the world could potentially go based on like the
Mm,
rate of agentic AI development, geopolitical
mm,
forces, all that stuff.
yeah,
So I just bring that as an example because like, that's like a basically a year and a half, 2 year time span, and things could be radically
yeah,
different. Now, when we're talking about 2035, AGI, ASI, all this great stuff, I think like it is so hard to predict, like obviously what life will be like in 10 years,
yeah,
right? But
yeah.
to Scott's point, like I think at the end of the day, what people need to realize is that we will be in a different world, whether or not that's like
Yeah,
wrecked by like
definitely.
climate change or like we live on like this weird cyberpunk. I'm a huge sci-fi fan, so like for example, Blade Runner 2049 type environment. Like I'm not sure if that's gonna happen, but like one thing to me stands clear is that just like the world is fundamentally going to be very different. Like everyone knows
Different,
that.
yeah.
The scale of that change, how that's going to manifest, I can't possibly comment on that. But what I will tell you is that from a climate change standpoint, 10 years from now will be very different in terms of sea level rise. We're already seeing it now with just like the meteorological passing of the seasons, areas of the world that are like, for example, India typically has and like for example, the summers in India have been noted to be extreme like like
You can see right
Hey,
now.
bingo. Like I was going to say, like our host, I think, like you're in India, if I'm not mistaken, right? Yeah, you're based out of there.
Yeah,
Like
yes, yeah,
in the
yeah.
news, there was talk about like how India this year for the Indian summer is going to be 50 degrees centigrade or more, I think. That's
Yes,
insane. Like we're going to be living in
yes.
a world of
Yeah.
massive temperature extremes moving into different parts of the year. So
Mm,
multiply that by like we just gave the coral reef example. Like again, we're at this point right now where
mhm,
85% of coral reefs. I used to be a marine ecologist. Like we see
mhm,
like this mass bleaching event. Will we have coral reefs in 10 years? Who knows? Scott seems
yeah.
to think no. You know what I mean?
No,
So
yeah.
Like
yeah,
there'll
very
there'll be a
few.
few spots that,
Right.
that
Very
have
few.
cold from deep water like flows that these will be the only ones that are going to be able to maintain enough
Right.
temperature.
Right. Again, like my point with all this is like the world is going to be like, this is very obvious to say out loud. The world is going to be very different, obviously, in 10
Mm,
years. And I still
mm,
don't think like, okay, like, yes, if AGI comes out and like we're all out of a job and like we're all on, what is it, universal basic income, which is what this like thing that I've
UBI.
seen, UBI, that I've seen like, in recent discussions in the techno ethics side of things, like, okay, but I still think like at the end of the day, like regardless of like what the technological advancements are, it's a combination of like good policy, citizen science with stakeholder, like what we were saying through this entire conversation, circular economy thinking that involves all the different
Mm,
stakeholders coming together. That is what
mm,
will, solve, I put this in quotes, like climate change. You
mhm.
know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
That is, I think, that's the first main thing I wanted to say. And the second thing is that as it stands right now with AI development, the thing that scares me the most is the misalignment of business
Mm,
priorities and
mm,
honestly just
yeah.
people and also the environment. Like it's again tacking
Mm,
on multi-layered things.
mm,
I think right now, a lot of this AI race that we're currently in the middle of is largely driven by business interests. And this is just my personal opinion. Scott, feel free to disagree with me if you want to. But I think like we are seeing this growing misalignment with this AI race where everyone's determined to be like
mm,
the number
yeah.
AI superpower. Sorry, partially dyslexic, reversing words in my head.
Mm,
And there
mm,
is a massive environmental and human cost to that way of thinking, especially when we're talking about like job displacement, what type of society we're going to live in. The ideal world for me is like, I would love AGI to solve climate change. Will it?
mm,
No, I don't think so.
mm.
Again, I think it'll be a combination of like the technology, people, policy,
Yeah, definitely.
just coming together. And I think we can. That's the thing. Like with all of this, is like I've also seen this argument that we're entering this era of abundance. Like I've seen this term being like thrown around so much.
Yeah.
Like the common argument with that is like if we're entering this era of abundance, like why haven't we like solved like Scott brought up this point about like we have millions of people around the world that are hungry despite like
Hungry, yeah.
modern agriculture systems that produce like an excess amount of food, but a lot of it is like wasted, for example, right? These problems are
Yeah.
systemic. It's just that, like, in some ways, like, we don't want to solve these problems, like, at the
Yeah.
top level, which is frustrating. But anyway, all of this to say, the world will be very different in 10 years. Number two, I really believe that there is a misalignment right now of AI development at the business, people, and environment scales. And number three, my ideal world is obviously a world, of course, no one wants to live in a world that's, like, broken by climate change. Of course not. Like,
Yeah.
I would like to have kids someday, and like I don't want my kids living in a world where, the whole coastline is gone because of sea level rise, but that's a reality that we gotta
Yeah.
face. So I
Yeah.
think like greater conversations like this, greater inclusion between like industry, people, policy coming together, working on sustainable AI principles. I did not summarize any of that in such an eloquent way like Scott did, but I certainly tried. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's a very powerful response. And of course, it was filled with a lot of enthusiasm and energy. And Scott's response came from his years of experience.
Right.
So that is why it was like very eloquently summarized and concise. So just to add to the like, to having your kids experience the best environment. Just as we were like when GPT-4o came in, it was marketed as like, okay, it can count the number of R's in the word strawberries. So I feel like our kids should be able to eat real strawberries instead of just counting the number of R's in
Nice.
the
Yeah.
strawberries using AI. And also a shift from like nationalism to humanism can help in this like AI race that's going on where everyone wants to just become the number one nation or a company, and shifting the focus to humanity driven AI development and deployment. So yeah, thank you so much for this very insightful conversation. Like none of my episodes have gone beyond 1 hour. So thank you so much for your time, and I really do respect your time and like how we finally made this thing happen. And of course, thanks to the cups of coffee that we had
Amen.
that kept us
Amen to
through this
that.
conversation. Yeah, thank you so much. And let me stop the recording. I hope you really enjoyed our little time travel to the year 2035. Now tell me, what excites you the most about the coming decade? Will our kids eat real strawberries or just count the number of R's in the word strawberries? What do you think? If you haven't seen parts 1 and 2 yet, please go check them out. Links are there in the description below. And if you are new here, hit subscribe because we bring you such deeply researched, thought provoking conversations every Saturday. Stay curious, my fellow air buds, and go for snorkeling or scuba diving until the coral reefs still exist. Until then, please do like, share, comment, subscribe, and hit the bell icon to make the YouTube algorithm happy and help us build an informed community that is excited about AI's benefits while staying aware of its risks. This is Aashka signing off for now. Let's ride these airwaves again soon.